of Water and the Spirit, Part 12, Chapters 13 and 14. Chapter 13, The Meeting at the Earth Shrine. The next day, Father came back from the farm, a little earlier than usual. I could almost hear him thinking, caught up in a net of perplexities that no one could help him solve. He looked pitiful. I knew that he was trying his best to win my sympathy and forgiveness about my abduction, the pain of my homecoming, and the pending initiation. He paced back and forth like a man searching for something, but unable to name what it was. He did not notice me. I was sitting outside the compound in the same place I had sat in when I arrived. After a while, I began to wonder whether his failure to notice me was because of the nature of the place I was sitting. Perhaps it was a place that swallowed whoever came near it into invisibility. Or perhaps it was just that a worried, crowded mind blurs the eyes. Father disappeared into the compound, and I decided to go after him, just in case he wanted to talk to me about the meeting ahead. I did not see him, but there was a line of ash in front of his door and in front of mine. I began to understand that the meeting with the elders had great significance for him. Otherwise, he would not have performed this ritual. One spreads ash when something is threatening to go wrong and must be stopped before it gets out of hand. What was he afraid of? Father walked out of the medicine room, where he had just finished doing something. He was still carrying some ash. He headed toward the shrine of the ancestors inside the goat's room. I followed him. He knelt, and I imitated his gesture. The place smelled of goat and sheep dung. In front of us were two statues holding hands, the dagger symbols of the ancestral masculine and feminine so important to the maintenance of a home. Partially concealed behind a mud wall and resting on a mud platform, the statues could not be clearly seen. Father stretched out the hand in which he held the ash and spoke breathlessly. "It is not bad news that I bring to your attention. A man of faith never leaves home without a word to you, the true keepers of this compound. I come to announce that we are going to meet the council of the elders and to ask that you be with us to inspire us to speak the truth. All I want is peace for this family and for everyone in it. May we arrive there in peace and come back home in peace. I bring this ash to you so you may use it to stop anything that might hinder this meeting from going well." Saying this, Father poured the ash all around the statues. Then we both stood and walked out of the room silently. We were the first to arrive at the meeting place, a little clearing outside the house of the priest of the Earth Shrine. In the center of the clearing was a circle made by 6 stones, and in the middle of that was the statue of Dawara, the community lawmaker. Seen from a little distance, the statue looked like the same cross on which Jesus died, made of wood from an unknown tree. But as you get closer, its appearance is terrible. The top side of it has the face of an elder in trance with his hands outstretched as if to placate something. On either side of the body pours water, while from his feet burst flames. It was not calming to look at this statue. When I saw it, I suddenly felt tense. The god Dawara can see without being seen and is a representative of supreme justice. He polices the tribe, always on the lookout for lawbreakers, and warns those who think they can get away with minor violations such as theft or lies. When someone is suspected of lying, this is the symbol they are asked to swear on. Nobody wants to have to say anything in the presence of Dawara because he sees everyone down to the bottom of his or her soul. This, coupled with his striking resemblance to the Christian cross, made me dread the meeting. The elders began to arrive one by one. First came the priest of the Earth Shrine, Kyr. The meeting place was just behind his compound, yet he was late. Kyr was so old that he walked with the support of 2 canes. He would put one cane in front of him, lean on it, and move his leg forward, then repeat the process for the other leg. He resembled a skeleton set in motion by a remote control. I felt the urge to help the old man, but I did not know how. I hesitated because I did not know what my father would think of me if I did, or whether this was customary or not. Anyway, did he want help? He seemed to be in no hurry to get to the meeting place. Every 5 or 10 feet, he would stop for a period of time longer than the one it took him to walk that distance. Then he would resume his painful progress. As he came into speaking range, he noticed us. It's been a long time since I became a four-legged. I have forgotten how fast the two-legged move. You must have jumped over here. My older son saw you as you walked out of the bush and into the surface of my property. I thought I should let you come closer. Then you vanished, and here you are. Did you jump over? Yes, my father replied. People never say no to questions like this. It is not polite. No implies denial. No one wants to deny, but to make it possible for all things to be affirmative. What they do or say in the next sentence, however, gives the real answer to the question, so father added, we just walked at the same speed. There was nobody at the outskirts of the compound when we got here. He spoke these words in a soft tone, different from the one he normally used at home. There was no doubt that he felt the authority of the old man. The priest spoke again. Then I do not wish you to live to be a four-legged. See, every morning when I wake up, it takes me a while before I can tell where I am. I always think I am in the country of the ghosts. My legs won't let me live here in this life, and I can't go to my ancestors where I won't need them anymore. My father looked embarrassed, as if he did not know how to talk to the chief. He growled, sputtered, and tried to laugh. Then, realizing that he should not laugh, he turned the unfinished laughter into a clearing of throat and ventured, there should be someone to help you. Why do you have to do this alone? I will ask my daughter to come over if you need some help. The chief laughed, or rather, he emitted an elephant-like sound that I interpreted as laughter. I too was on the verge of exploding with laughter because of the comical way in which the old man was talking, but I could not laugh out of respect. He could not talk and walk at the same time, and he could not listen and walk at the same time. Your daughter will cost me 3 cows, 2 barrels of cowrie shells, 7 sheep, and as many chickens as I have fingers left on my hands. I looked at his hands. He had 6 fingers on each one. The 6th finger was a useless protrusion the size of the small toe, with an incomplete nail on it. Wasn't that what you gave as a dowry for his mother? He asked, pointing one of his sticks at me. Now, I don't think I can do that, so I'll just use my own daughters until someone dares to want them. By that time, I should be ready to get rid of this damn body of mine. I can't use my wives because all 4 of them have lost their sight. Sounds like a conspiracy, if you ask me. Why would 4 women decide to go blind, all in the same year? Can you answer that? I know that Napo, my oldest, was having some problems seeing this side of reality. I did not worry about her because she was old enough to not care anymore. A woman who stops bearing children should turn her sight to other things anyway. But the 3 others, what business did they have to think that the affliction of their superior co-wife was in order that they too should get rid of their sight? You figure out this riddle for me. Isn't this a perfect example of blackmail? Now I can't ask them for anything. The chief was obviously in a good mood. Father, out of respect for old age, was too nervous to participate in the chief's bantering. He said, I was just trying to help. It looks as if you would get here quicker if you stopped speaking. This much was true. The chief looked as if he planned to never stop talking, but he took my father's advice seriously and began to move again. Eventually, he made it to one of the large granite stones, let his hands glide down the sticks, and sat down. His appearance was unearthly. His spirit was so unlike his body that it felt as if 2 living entities were competing with each other. The level of detachment he had with his body was an unmistakable sign of the work of the spirit in a person who knows what ultimately lasts and what does not. Kyra had abandoned any notion of external aesthetics, but one could see beneath the surface of his wasted body a spirit far more beautiful than any representation of the divine. The experience of such a spirit made me disregard the ugliness of his body as something superfluous to the expression of beauty, integrity, honesty, and genuine life that glowed all around him. The priest of the earth shrine reminded me of grandfather and made me understand why the wise pay little attention to their bodies. In their world, dirt has no negative effect on life because they have no concept of its being evil. These earth people live like Mother Earth. Their cleanliness is in their spirits. I wondered if those who spend their lives obsessed with looking beautiful are not fighting to cover up something ugly deep within. Our shallow appreciation of outward beauty might be more a confused reaction to the memory of true beauty than an actual encounter with it. In that case, the beauty that exists on the outside of a person would serve only as a reminder to us of the real beauty of the spirit behind it. These elders had long ago understood this and chose to focus their energies where they really count on matters of the soul. All of this went through my mind as I watched the priest of the earth shrine sit. He put his sticks away, breathed contentedly, and saluted my father as if he had just met him. The other elders arrived, quickly and silently. The sun was about to set, and they were all late. Presently, each of the 6 stones had a man on it. Each elder was assigned a stone to use until he died. Each time a stone was left empty by death, the chief of the earth shrine selected another man among the grandfathers and great-grandfathers of the community. The priest of the earth shrine is always succeeded at his death by the eldest of his sons from his first wife. So this circle had existed since time immemorial. The once gray stones had been used for so long that they were polished and blackened with age. The chief declared the beginning of the meeting by clearing his throat loudly. We are here tonight to water our garden, but this is not like our regular watering, for that which grows in our garden needs far more water than we had believed. A few months ago, this grandson of ours found his way back to his roots, coming out of the wilderness where the white man lives, the one who hunts men. When the spirits have a plan for someone, he survives even the unsurvivable. We know this boy is here for a reason. I have summoned you together so that we can find out if there is something we can do to help him get home. The last time we met, Bofing, our diviner and ash thrower, said he could not tell us if this boy can pass through Bayor and learn what he must learn. We want to see if there is a chance that he can. A short, stout elder seated directly opposite the chief began speaking, almost interrupting the chief. What are we doing here? Are we letting a wanderer who has become a stranger because he stayed away too long trouble the peace of our council? This is not the first time someone has come back from the wild. Why should we act as if his arrival were so special that we had to invite him to sit here? Why should we let this uninitiated kid come to this sacred place with a father who obviously has no knowledge of what makes an elder an elder? We are violating our principles today, compromising the sacredness of this circle. Our ancestors will judge us for doing this. Finsu, the chief replied, we are talking about a drizzle, not about a tempest. When I sent Dogo, whom we all agreed should design the medicine to help this boy get through Bayor to divine on this matter, the ancestors told us something that convinced me of the appropriateness of inviting this boy and his father to come here. You cannot ignore the fact that the dawn hides the coming day. Otherwise, you may be unprepared when the day comes. The destiny of this grandchild has been known since his birth. We want to make an offer to him, a risky offer, and we want to hear him say yes so the rest of our plans can proceed. Well, why didn't you tell us that in the first place? When we last met, it was clear to all of us that we were facing a delicate and dangerous situation. We have agreed that all must be done in the interest of the village, not that of any individual. Even if you had it all checked out, our responsibility requires the exercise of the highest caution. I felt sorry for Finsu. Obviously, he hated anything out of the ordinary and had little sympathy for anyone who did not fit into established categories. Dogo, who was seated next to him, spoke. When the chief asked me to consult with the spirits, I did not know what to expect. All I knew was that when Bofing performed his divination, he could not guarantee that his medicine was going to work during Bayor because he could not locate the boy's Psi double. I was alarmed when I heard him say this. The Psi is a person's spirit, the part of him or her that is connected to the ancestral world. A person who is suffering from serious psychological problems is said to have left his spirit somewhere. Living away from your double is like living with chaos, terror, and insecurity. Dogo continued, I don't know how someone can live without a Psi. I suppose that this is what happens when someone is swallowed by a foreign way of life. Now, Bofing is not a member of the Council of Bayor this season, so he will not be able to oversee the working of the medicine for this boy. But Giso, who has worked with the boy ever since he arrived, knows him better than any one of us, and he thinks he can succeed. I consulted with the spirits for a yes or no answer, which I communicated to the chief. That is why he convened this meeting. Thank you, Dogo, for your useful clarification, Finsu said. But the cloud in my head left me even before you explained matters to me. All I'm saying is that someone should have told us this before. But somehow, I still don't like the idea that we are making such a fuss about this boy. Last rainy season, one just like him came back from Ghana. The lad was fine. He brought back a lot of nice things with him too. Then he left. I hear you fine, Finsu, Kair said, but we all know that this return is different. This boy seems to have left himself behind, and he wants to stay. He wants to be one of us. For reasons I couldn't understand, Finsu would not stop arguing. His sarcastic character was made worse, perhaps because he was the youngest and the proudest of the council. I don't think someone who paints language on a paper should be trusted, he continued. This boy speaks too fast. He has no respect for anyone. He yells at his family. His father can testify to that. If we do not do something, and soon, he may turn out to be some sand in our food. Something has to be done. Bofing came to my defense. He spoke as if he were trying to appeal to Finsu's sense of compassion. I thought that this is what we came here this evening to do. We are talking about one of our sons. I remember Malidoma as a little boy, bright-eyed, cheerful, obedient. We all looked to him as one with a promising future. Bakai, his grandfather, who sat where you now sit in this council, told us everything about him that we needed to know, that he was a good boy with a good spirit who would help us preserve our ways. How can we throw him out when he has crawled across the world to return to our hearts? I didn't remember any elder looking at me as a child with a promising future, nor did I believe that my future held anything promising. From the direction that this meeting was taking, it seemed more likely that the opposite was true. Hadn't I made trouble that propelled me into this place? Didn't this man have to defend me? You're a sentimental fart, Finsu said scornfully, prepared to stand his ground. I lost my sympathy for him. When that white priest left with Malidoma on his back, do you think that he did not know that he was creating a time bomb to come back and destroy our village, the juice of our lives? Water that has been spilled cannot be collected again. But what about the destiny assigned to the boy at birth? Kair argued. He is the first male child of his parents and must be the one to become the priest of his family after his father dies. We all know that if he is not initiated, this will be the first time we have ever disobeyed the ancestors. This is a risk we have to take. We have to get Malidoma back with us, or he is gone. The passionate intervention of the priest of the earth shrine seemed to slow Finsu down a bit. He fell silent, a silence loud enough to indicate that he was hatching something. Then he said, our knowledge is not the best. The white man's is better, and this boy knows it. Personally, I can't compete with the white man, and I don't like the idea of trying to fight against something when I know I can't win. I have an idea. Let Malidoma go back where he came from. He is one of us, Finsu, the chief replied. Father, who had kept silent longer than he could bear, pleaded with the elders. He came back from the wilderness because he really cares about us. He doesn't want to leave his village like all these other children today, daydreaming their lives away about being modern, going to the cities. If we let them all go, if we let my son go, we'll die without a trace. Our civilization will end, and we will be responsible. I still say send him away, Finsu insisted. There are things you can never make someone forget, and we can't make him forget what he experienced. Bofing didn't like this. He continued on from where his argument had ended earlier. Send him away, and you'll add to what he can never forget. What he experienced can be good for us. I can't see how, Finsu said. If we want to know what he knows, we will have to ask him to teach us. If we do this, we give him too much power. Do you think it is good for a boy to teach his elders? I don't think so. Bofing disagreed. What alternatives do we have? If we don't want to know what he knows, that means we don't want him among us. This is terrible. What is terrible, said Finsu, is when we allow him to infect everybody with this sickness. Finsu, let me finish before you infect everyone with discord, said Kyre, who by now was unable to contain his irritation. When I consulted the ancestors about Malidoma this morning, I was advised that we have to open ourselves to this boy and welcome him back because, throughout his exile, he's never forgotten us. The ancestors told me that when he lived in the village, he was always close to his grandfather, our Bakhai, his real teacher. I also learned that he came back because his grandfather told him to. The ancestors said that he will be our mouth, and through him, the white man will become friends with us. Let us bring forward our wisdom and recognize what our duties are to him. We will offer him Beor. Now, I want to ask the father of this boy what he wants for his son. I liked the chief for saying what he had said, and I felt he knew me better than I knew myself. But the question he asked my father seemed to take father by surprise. He jerked around and looked at me appealingly, as if for guidance. Then he looked at the 6 elders. When he saw that we were waiting for him to speak, he cleared his throat and ventured, "Thank you for offering me the honor of speaking. I feel like a child here. As a father, I know I should be clear about what I want for my son, but you know I have not been with him very much since his grandfather left us. I want him to do whatever he can in order to be a part of the family and the community, but I do not know if this is what he wants. I don't know what to say in this situation." Finsu took over. "What are you trying to say, young man?" he asked my father. "I mean that what my son wants is what I want." "I'll still wait to hear the man in you speak," Finsu said, "for you have not spoken yet. I have to be honest about what I think when it comes to my son. I don't know how to speak for him. Only he does. My answer came from my heart and my belly. Do you all hear that? Here is a man who doesn't know his role toward his own son. Are you the real father of this boy, or are you his son?" I began to hate the man because I saw his strategy. He had been humiliated by the chief, and now he was trying to take it out on my father. I could not remain quiet. What my father wants is what I want. True, I held some grudges against father, but I could not stand by when he was attacked and not defend him. He wants me to be initiated. The chief wants me to be initiated. Everybody wants me to be initiated, and I will be initiated. Whether it works for me or not, I have nothing to lose. If something happens to me and I can't make it, that's my business. I will do anything to belong to my community and to my family. Finsu leaped off his stone seat as if something had bitten him. He grabbed his machete and raised it high. "Who asked you to speak?" he shouted. "Since when do babies speak to their elders without being asked?" Everybody began to talk at once. I sensed that they wanted to calm Finsu down without making him look as if he were in the wrong. I knew I had done something improper, but I did not care. I did not feel sorry for what I said, even though I was uneasy that I had disturbed the sanctity of a council meeting. My anger at Finsu had nothing to do with the council. To me, he was a person before being a councilman. Finally, the chief managed to make himself heard. Stop. Let's not give this boy the impression that this is the way our meetings go. I asked a question, and the response came to me. This is what we wanted to hear. You can't walk naked into the rain and expect to keep your body dry. This is the first time the council has met with individual persons. A change in tradition requires a change in the way things happen. I am not sorry for this boy's behavior. For a long time, this council has been ignoring the fact that a new day is forcing itself upon us. We are becoming outdated without knowing it. If the council is going to continue to exist in this community, we have to pay more attention to those who return from the wild. We cannot change the things that have happened to us. Our recent past is flooded with strangers coming from far away into our land and staying with us against our will. That's true. The man who spoke had not said a thing since he arrived. Another man ventured. I think the old days are giving birth to new sons. What I don't know is what will make them shine. Thank you, Daisy. Thank you, Scene, said Kyra. He indicated me. There, sitting among us, is an expression of this new sun. He said he wants to get the chance to shine. I say we must let him and give him our blessing. He knows things that we don't know. Let him learn what we know. Who knows what will come out of him? Fired as he will be in the kiln of two knowing paths. What do you say, all of you? I agree, said Daisy. I can think of at least one good thing that we will gain if the bad does not prevent it from happening. The people who taught him all he knows do not know a thing about us. We don't know about them either. Who is the white man? What is his medicine like? Who can actually answer these questions for us? I think that if we open the belly of this little boy, we will see a lot of things we needed to know about from the beginning. I don't like to live with something I don't know, nor do I want to throw it away because I don't understand it. We all believe that there is a reason why things come together. I say, let this boy be initiated. Everyone else agreed, but Finsu said nothing. He was brooding over something. For a while, it felt as if the whole council were waiting on him, waiting for his word, as if everything depended upon it. Finally, sensing this, he said, if that's what the council wants, who am I to say no? The chief thanked him, and everybody nodded. We could barely see each other by then. The night had quietly swallowed us. The meeting came to a close, and we began to disperse. Before leaving, Finsu went to the chief and said, next time, Kyra, would you avoid making a fool of me? I promise it will not happen again. Thank you. My father and I came to say goodbye to the chief. As we approached him, I heard him murmur, avoid making a fool of you, Finsu? Not yet. Then he greeted my father and smiled at me. He had no teeth. That night, I tried in vain to sleep. Something major had happened to me. I had seen a council meeting, and I had seen how hard decisions were to make. I finally understood my father's hesitation when he had first mentioned Bayor to me. A page of my life was being turned. I was going to be initiated as soon as harvest was over. Chapter 14. My first night at the initiation camp. Time flew. The millet fields were generous, and the harvest was good. The hard work of collecting and transporting grain from the farm to the roofs of houses, where it waited to be put into the granaries, was over. Now, in the fallow season, the villagers turned their attention to spiritual matters. Initiation. The dry season would be painfully idle if there was nothing else to do. One afternoon, I was sitting outside with my sister when a town crier came running to my father's house. In a Dagara village, the town crier is considered an envoy of the spirit. He does not greet people or otherwise behave normally, for he is possessed by the message he has been commissioned to convey. He appears very agitated while doing so because he is responding to what the spirits have told him to do. Out of breath, he stopped in front of us, mumbled something, and drew a cross on the mud wall of the women's quarter. He said nothing but instead sang a bizarre song. As he was about to go away, I stopped him. Wait a minute. What's all this about? What? You don't know? Well, a child who lives in this house will become a man if he lives that long. This answer transfixed me. I sat down. I had imagined that Beor was scheduled for the middle of the dry season. Seeing my perplexity, my sister tried to clarify things for me. You cannot be told about it until the day before. If you know ahead of time, something is wrong. So my initiation begins tomorrow, and I am not the least prepared for it. Your not knowing is your being prepared. Did anybody in this house know? How would anyone know? The council of initiation is very secretive. I had become accustomed to being relaxed about initiation since that evening at the council's quarter. Now, the sudden proximity of the experience brought my blood to boiling heat. That night, I could not sleep. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw ghosts all over the place. I lived the whole night in the country of ghosts, and the only time I was able to sleep, grandfather appeared to me. He was dressed in the same ragged clothes he wore 15 years ago. He greeted me in French. Shocked, I replied, "Grandfather, you speak French?" "Of course I do. I'm dead. Look, I want you to know that this is another journey of pain." I was half awake. I sat up in bed to make sure that I was fully understanding what grandfather was saying to me. Noticing this, he continued, "I said that this initiation is another journey of pain, but you're going to the real school now. I hope you're feeling strong. If you see a consumo, just remember you've seen them before." When I woke up, I could not even remember how grandfather had left or how the dream had ended. I awakened because father was calling me to inform me that we had something to do together before I was taken out of the village. Then he disappeared. My brain was crowded. I sat on my bed, trying to sort things out. No one bothered me until the middle of the afternoon, when father called me again. The house seemed to be deserted. I walked out of my room into the inner yard, where father was waiting for me. He held ash in one hand and a bowl of water in the other. He handed me the water, and I followed him into the medicine room. We knelt down, and he began. "While he said, saluting the spirits, to the rising of the sun, to the powers of life, to you who established the directives and the meaning of crossing the bridge from non-person to person through the hard road of knowledge. Here is another one who leaves his warm home and comes to you seeking the path of memory. The road is dangerous, the process uncertain, but with your protection, upon which we rely, he will return to us a man. Let him come back alive." Father motioned to me to hand him the water, which he sprinkled onto the spirits, the statues of the male and female ancestors. He had already done the same with the ash in his hands. Then he continued, "Take this ash and give him the power of his ancestors. Take this water to seal the contract between us that he will return from his journey with a heart turned toward his tribe and a soul toward his ancestors." He then turned to me and said, "The time has come. I will not have much to say to you again until I may never say anything to you again unless you come back. I have done what a father should do. The rest is in your hands. Please come back to us." The whole family was outside watching. When I followed father out into the compound, everybody looked at me with sympathy. My younger brothers were staring at me as if I were going on a long journey with no specific time of return. I had no idea how long I was going to be absent. We all walked away from the house toward the outskirts of the village. As we neared the bush, more and more people joined us. There was a large group of young adolescents, maybe 13, maybe 14 years old, packed together at the edge of the bush. They looked so young that I felt out of place. They were all naked. Nakedness is very common in the tribe. It is not a shameful thing. It is an expression of one's relationship with the spirit of nature. To be naked is to be open-hearted. Normally, kids stay naked until puberty and even beyond. It was only with the introduction of cheap cloth from the West, through Goodwill and other Christian organizations, that nakedness began to be associated with shame. The naked kids were singing. As I came closer, I could hear their words. My little family I leave today. My great family I meet tomorrow. Father, don't worry, I shall come back. Mother, don't cry, I am a man. As the sun rises and the sun sets, my body into them shall melt, and one with you in them. Forever and ever I shall be. As the candidates for initiation passed through the crowd, they took off their shirts and shorts. Their families embraced them. Some family members grabbed their hands and sobbed with them. Perhaps they were saying goodbye for the last time. There were so many young men that I could not count them all. Many of them were strangers to me. My father asked me to take my clothes off. I obeyed him, but I felt ashamed. No one paid any attention to my nakedness, however. In the village, clothing attracts more attention than nakedness. My sister was weeping when she grabbed my hand. A little annoyed by this display of emotion, I pulled myself loose and joined a group of candidates who were singing. To become a man, I must go. Into nature's womb, I must return. But when I come back, the joy of rebirth for you, I will sing. My little family I leave today. My great family I meet tomorrow. Father, don't worry, I shall come back. Mother, don't cry, I am a man. We sang as we walked into the belly of the bush, swallowed by the trees. We were not walking in any order. I felt driven forward by the crowd of kids, and my feet moved automatically. How many of us are going into the bush to be initiated? How many villages are represented here? I wanted to ask someone, but I felt what I can only describe as a palpable pressure against asking questions. The air around me was charged with the sensation that something serious was happening, something so big that to start trying to put it into words would desecrate it or go counter to the whole purpose of the gathering. So I kept quiet and did as everyone else was doing. Besides, people were singing and walking too fast for conversation. I decided that later I would seize the first opportunity to find out who my fellow initiates were. The initiation camp was a rudimentary clearing in the center of the bush, hidden in the midst of a grassy savanna by the protective walls of the surrounding mountains and foothills. Envisioning a place where the marvelous and the supernatural could happen naturally, I had imagined the decor of talismanic medicine tools, hyenas' tails sewn onto elephant skin to enhance vision, courage, and determination, dried lions' hearts for special intrepid missions, hunting relics for mystical rites, catskin bags containing non-material attack instruments, and the like. But the clearing turned out to be just a circle like the one in the middle of a farm that farmers reserve for the harvested crop before they carry it home. Maybe that's what Bayor was supposed to mean, a return to or a harvest of simplicity. In this case, we were the crop. The area was divided into two circular sections. The larger was used as a place of instruction and a sleeping area for the neophytes. 30 meters away was another circle reserved for the 5 elders in charge of the rites of Bayor. Each of the 5 elders had a straw mat for a bed. Each mat was brand new. At the center of the elders' circle, there was a fireplace in a little hut. I assumed the hut contained the teaching tools for the 6 weeks to come. All the evidence suggested that the elders seemed to know exactly what they were about to get us into. Our circle, on the other hand, was virtually empty when we got there. We began by collecting leaves from trees to make beds for the coming night and dry wood for the fire. As soon as we arrived, the elders disappeared, and we were given directions by a coach, a graduate from a previous training who was in charge of practical organizational matters. We knew that the elders were there somewhere, but we didn't see them until nightfall, when they appeared suddenly out of nowhere to begin our training. Meanwhile, As we prepared for the night, I wondered what we were supposed to do for dinner. No one talked or asked any questions, and the general silence was beginning to annoy me. I asked my friend Nyanali if women from the village were going to bring us dinner since we had not eaten since morning. Nyanali was busy dexterously tearing the leaves off a branch he had stripped from a tree. Without turning his head, he matter-of-factly said that if a woman showed up here, she would be cut to pieces and roasted. "How are we going to eat then?" I asked, surprised. "We did not come out here to eat. If you're hungry, have dinner anywhere you can as long as you do not disturb the schedule." "Do you know how many of us are here?" I asked as a way to change the subject. "3 times 20 plus 3. 5 villages altogether," he replied. "That's a dagger account for 63. When darkness fell that first night, our coach roared at us to prepare for the circle of fire. He communicated with his hunter's wheel, whistling the words rather than singing them. The wheel looks like a 5-inch flute, with 2 holes on the right side and 1 hole on the left side. The dagger language is a tone language, that is to say, it is spoken like a chant. It is customary on important ritual occasions to blow words through this flute. Each sound has a code meaning, and people take this kind of message more seriously. The coach's summons came while a group of us was outside the initiation circle, still collecting dry wood or fresh leaves. I had little knowledge of musical language, and all I understood was something about gathering around the sun of the night. The rest of the message seemed like perfect gibberish to me. The communication was very complex, and it almost seemed like the coach took a personal interest in polishing his musical language into something too advanced for illiterate musical interpreters like me. Sensing my difficulty, Nyanali translated for me. He says that the sun is going to lie down for the night. As the blanket of darkness spreads over the land of the gods, the ancestors have requested the elders to ask him to summon us to gather for the instructional ceremony. That's what he said word for word. What's this supposed to mean? Nothing, replied Nyanali, uninterested. Very soon the elders will show up to tell us what we're going to be doing out here. That's all there is to it. I was becoming conscious of entering an unknown space. The message of the flute was the first mystery. How many more were to come? When we returned to the initiation circle, nearly everybody was gathered there. The sun had set and twilight was at its height, about to yield the last bit of its daylight to the overwhelming impress of the night. In the middle of the circle, a little hole had been dug. Around it, pieces of dry wood were being planted. Smaller pieces of wood went on top. More wood was added until a fireplace was built. The coach supervised this, aided by those nearest him, candidates who could not help. Because there were so many of us, either stood and watched or continued preparing their beds. It was pitch dark by the time the fire was ready to be lit. The coach plunged his hand into his medicine bag, bringing out 2 firestones. He placed dry grass next to the fireplace and scratched the firestones against each other. A spark flew out onto the grass, but was ineffective. He repeated the gesture several times until smoke finally began to rise from the pile of dry grass. One of the boys knelt down and blew onto the fire. He seemed in no hurry, starting slowly, his eyes closed, as if trying to incorporate the spark consuming the dry grass into his inner self. Meanwhile, the coach mumbled prayers to the divinities of the south, the god of metal, and to Daisy, the light bearer. His prayer ended as the grass ignited. Then he lit a bundle of dry millet stems from the burning grass, lifted the stems into the air, prayed again to the gods, and touched the fire to the wood. Soon, the fire drove back the blackness of the night. Our shadows danced rhythmically with the flames, which roared to the beat of their own music. Compelled by an invisible force, the group began to sing the song of light. O light of burning fire, clean the mud of the night that sticks to the lids of my sight. O instrument of my sight, do not close the lids of my eyes, even when you eat the wood to ash. Can I see without your light? Can I live without your heat? Can I survive your plight, O light of burning fire? I did not remember having heard this song before, but the music was inviting, calming my restless mind, still thinking about food and soothing my heart. I mumbled along, wishing I knew how to sing it like everyone else, but I had been away too long. In the middle of the circle, we instinctively formed. The coach directed the singing. The song got inside of you, burning your heart like fire. I was quickly caught up in its rhythms, words, and melody. We held hands and swayed in cadence. It was intoxicating to sing in the middle of the bush at night, even on an empty stomach. At this point, the elders made a dramatic entrance. They looked like living skeletons, half naked, with white lines painted on their faces, necks, bellies, and backs. Each elder wore ritual cotton shorts, voluminous and bag-like from afar. Their thin black bodies were invisible in the dark, leaving only the phosphorescent white lines to glow faintly. Each elder carried a feline skin medicine bag. They walked in a line, slowly and imperturbably. When they were far from the fire, their bodies seemed luminescent. But as they moved closer into the firelight, the glow disappeared. Their presence energized the song, and we sang more furiously, as though the power of the elders, suddenly tangible, was a gift that flowed from the force of their age. The elders walked around the fire 3 times clockwise, then 3 times counterclockwise, not singing with us. When they stopped, the song ended as if by enchantment. No one told us to stop, it simply left our lips, like a calabash of water taken from the lips of the thirsty. A thick silence followed, as heavy as the darkness behind us in the bush. One of the elders reached into his bag and pulled out a pouch with an end resembling a tail. Long, stiff hairs sprouted from the pouch, giving it an eerie, otherworldly appearance. He brought it to his mouth and whispered something, his lips moving silently. Then he directed the tail end of the pouch toward the fire and uttered words in a primal tongue. The fire's color shifted to violet, and its roar grew louder. We held each other's hands tightly. The elder moved closer to the fire, speaking again in the primal language. With each of his movements, the fire grew taller, its violet flame stretching almost 6 meters into the air. The fire transformed into a ghostly figure, its arms flaming, one holding a blazing stick. Its legs were covered in a robe of roaring flame. The elders seemed to vanish, replaced by this spectral fire being. I suddenly understood what we were to experience in the next 6 Dagara weeks. No one had told me, yet the knowledge was as if poured directly into my mind. I couldn't say if it had been there before or came with the fire's transformation. The ghostly flame eventually receded, reluctant and slow, into the fire. The elder responsible for this event stood rigid, his eyes wide and fixed on the flames. The other elders remained where they had been, their apparent disappearance merely an effect of the fire's supernatural presence. The coach instructed us to sit. 4 elders positioned themselves around us at the 4 cardinal directions, facing inward. The 5th elder, who had conjured the fire's transformation, stood near the fireplace. Walking slowly, he began speaking continuously, breathlessly, as if racing to finish a task. What he said felt deeply familiar, as if he was articulating something we had always known but could never express. He explained, "The place where I stand is the center. Each of you has a center. After birth, you grow away from this center. To be born is to lose touch with it. To grow from childhood to adulthood is to move further from it. The center is both within and without. It is everywhere. But we must realize it exists, find it, and return to it. Without the center, we cannot know who we are, where we come from, or where we are going." The elder explained that the purpose of Bayor was to find our center. This school specialized in repairing the wear and tear incurred in 13 rainy seasons of life. I was 20. Had I been home all this time, I would have undergone this process 7 years ago. I wondered if I was catching up too late, but concluded that it was better late than never. No one's center is like someone else's. Find your own center, not the center of your neighbor, not the center of your father or mother or family or ancestor, but that center which is yours and yours alone, he said. While speaking, the elder held his medicine pouch with the stiff tail pointing upward. He moved slowly, as if guided by an invisible force, animated by a vibrant energy that seemed to defy fatigue. He continued, saying that each of us is a circle, like the one we had formed around the fire. We are both the circle in its center. Without a circle, there is no center, and without a center, there is no circle. When there is a center, he said, there are four live parts to the circle: the rising part in the east in its right side, the north, and the setting part in the west in its right side, the south. All human beings are circles. Our setting part represents the coolness of water. It provides the peace of the body and soul and bridges the gap between how we look on the outside and how we are on the inside. It brings us to our family, the village, the community. It makes us many. The God of the setting side is the God of the water we drink, the water that quenches our thirst. The elder paused briefly, then continued. Its counterpart is the rising part, the fire, the God that makes us do, feel, see, love, and hate. The fire has power, a great power of motion, both within us and without. Outside us, it drives us toward one another, toward the execution of our respective duties, toward the planning of our lives. Inside us, the fire pulls the spiritual forces beyond us toward us. The fire within us is what causes our real family, those we are drawn to when we see them to identify us. From the realm where the ancestors dwell, this fire can be seen in each of us, shining like the stars you see above your heads. Imagine what would happen if you did not have this fire. You would be a dead star, invisible, wild, and dangerous. The elder's voice grew more intense. Yes, the fire within us is never dead. Therefore, it never needs to be reborn. When we know, without being told, that we must perform a certain sacrifice or ritual, it is because the fire tells us. Through the fire within, we constantly dialogue with those we left behind when we were born. The fire is the rope that links us to our real home, a place we abandoned when we died into being human. But there is nothing wrong with leaving our real home. You will understand why long before the end of your learning here. But I am not the one to tell you this. Why should I be? I can't tell anyone what their personal truth is, and who would I be to even try? The elder stopped walking, but his eyes never left the fire in front of him. He stared into it with such intensity that it seemed as though he was seeing another ghost emerge. From the four corners of the circle, the other elders watched him, their unblinking eyes reflecting the dancing flames. The Dagara view of fire is vastly different from that of the Western world, he explained. In the West, fire is often seen as wild, dangerous, and unmanageable, something to control, as evidenced by the presence of fire departments. To the Dagara, the chaos fire inspires in the West is because it is upset. Western people have forgotten their purpose in life. My gaze shifted from the elder to the other neophytes sitting around the fire. Each had a distinct posture, as if they were stones or human dolls stuffed with straw. They appeared to have lost control of their bodies. For a moment, I felt like the only conscious person there. The others seemed to have shifted into a closer relationship with what the elder in the center of the circle was teaching, but I couldn't figure out how they had made the shift. Why was I an outsider, incapable of entering the same state of intensity? I tried to concentrate, but the more I focused, the more I realized how alone I felt. I could not sense the presence of those next to me. My body stopped registering anyone's presence, as though there was no one around for it to respond to. I couldn't even fully experience my own fear. It felt like someone else was being afraid on my behalf. It was as if the elder were still speaking, but I was the only one unable to hear him. Suddenly, my perception changed, turning inside out in an instant. No, the elder had been speaking all along. He had never stopped talking or staring into the fire. But this realization didn't stabilize me. Instead, it thrust me into a series of contradictions, strange realizations, and abnormal perceptions of reality. I became conscious of an overwhelming urge to analyze and intellectualize everything I was experiencing. This impulse felt cold and purposeless. I grew tired of the endless questioning and my inability to understand. I felt trapped, caught inside a stone wall with no way out, yet not knowing where I would be if I escaped. Something inside of me began screaming for me to break out of this spell of isolation. I asked myself, where am I if I am the only one alive in this circle? Where are these people, the elders, the neophytes, my friend Nyanali, who is sitting next to me as stiff as a dead piece of wood? The fire was still emitting its roaring sound, but it too had stopped moving. Everybody and everything around me was like a museum piece, and I had become a visitor to that museum. It was then that the bush around us narrowed. I was quite certain that the trees had moved closer, but how much closer I could not tell. I felt as if everything around me, other than the strangely immobile fire and my companions, had come to life a strange life. I could not assess this state by any yardstick other than that of my own absolute certitude. All around me and underneath me, I could feel life pulsating, down to the smallest piece of dirt on the ground. The way this life expressed itself was otherworldly. Sounds were blue or green, colors were loud. I saw incandescent visions and apparitions, breathing color amid persistent immobility. Everything seemed alive with meaning. Even the stone-like circle of people partook of the same cacophony of meaning. Each person was like the sum total of all the emanations taking place. The people, however, were not in charge of the operation of the universe around them. They were dependent on it, and they were useful to it as well. The elder in the center of the circle was the most intriguing to watch. He looked like an impalpable being in fusion, an amalgamation of colors, sounds of varying pitch, and innumerable forms. All of his smallest constituent parts, his cells, and the bacteria in his body, even the tiniest atomic particles of his being had come alive. He was not moving, but the colors, the sounds, and the life forms were. Without being able to put it into words, I understood what was happening, for at that stage of consciousness, there is no difference between meaning and being. Things had become their meaning, and I knew that was the lesson for the evening. I also understood that this was the kind of knowledge I was going to become gradually acquainted with, not by going outside of myself, but by looking within myself and a few others. For now, all I could do was to feel and honor the effects of the subtle, invisible world breaking through my own blindness and preempting my perceptions. How acquiescent one becomes when face to face with the pure universal energy. Tune in for part 2, coming soon. Thank you for your support. Peace, blessings, and much love to you all.